All right, let's get right into it. The new signal you really need to be tracking isn't about the latest chips or the fanciest models. Nope, it's about who gets to build the future, and, more importantly, under what conditions. We are talking about the rise of a permissioned internet.
So where are the fault lines? We're going to trace 6 key pressure points where the digital world is colliding, and I mean colliding, with the physical one. We'll start in the halls of government, move through some pretty intense moral debates, and land right in the wiring of the capital markets.
Because really, this is the whole vibe, isn't it? The AI boom is waking up from its very expensive, very beautiful dream, only to find out it still has to pay rent in the real world. You know, a world with politics and courtrooms and, yes, actual power bills.
Okay, let's start with that core signal. Over just 2 days, March 30th and 31st, a couple of key events sent a message that you cannot ignore. Binding governance is here. The whole era of soft guidance, you know, those friendly suggestions and voluntary best practices, that's over. Done. The era of hard leverage has officially begun.
So what does this hard leverage actually look like in practice? Well, that brings us to our first pressure point. This is where guidance grows teeth, and where the state reminds everyone that it's the ultimate gatekeeper.
What's so fascinating here is the fundamental change that's happening. We are literally watching the soft, fuzzy language of corporate responsibility get welded to the hard leverage of contract law and liability. It's a shift from, hey, you should probably do this, to, you absolutely will do this, or else.
And this isn't some abstract theory, right? It's happening now. In California, a new executive order now tethers these massive state AI contracts to mandatory safeguards. No safeguards, no money. A day earlier, India proposed rules that could make government advisories legally binding. That puts a platform's entire safe harbor protection at risk. See? Different tactics, exactly the same result. Play by the new rules or lose your license to operate.
Now for pressure point number 2, walling off the kids. This is no longer just some quirky national experiment. A global consensus on cordoning off minors online is hardening into real, actual enforcement.
And this slide just lays it out so clearly. Just look at the timeline. Australia's regulator is shifting to an enforcement stance with potentially huge fines. Indonesia is calling in Meta and Google over compliance. France is debating a bill to just block social media entirely for kids under 15. This is a synchronized global wave, people. This is not a coincidence.
And look, let's be clear. This all starts from a place that's really tough to argue with, a genuine concern for child safety. I mean, who's against that? The real tension, though, isn't the goal. It's the machinery that's being built to enforce it.
Because it's snapping into a hard legal reality, like right now. We're moving from panicked headlines to day-to-day operational enforcement, and that means stronger age verification, more restricted access, all of which could end up normalizing a much more permissioned web for every single one of us. All right, let's shift to our third pressure point, and this one is a moral flashpoint so visceral, so ugly, that it's forcing a complete legal rewrite of what digital harm even is.
For years, we've talked about AI-generated abusive content like this, a platform moderation problem. You know, it was something for the policy team to handle, a mess to be cleaned up after the fact, after the damage was already done.
Yeah, that's over. Sparked by the case of TV host Colleen Fernandez, Germany is now drafting a bill to criminalize the production of pornographic deepfakes, not just sharing them. This is absolutely crucial. The act is being reframed from a moderation headache to a digital sexual violence statute. It moves the crime all the way upstream to the very moment of creation.
So, while the regulators are getting tougher, the AI money story is getting, well, twitchier. The financial engine that's fueling this whole boom is starting to collide with the very hard limits of physical and economic scarcity.
Just think about this number for a second. $635 billion. That's what big tech is planning to spend on AI by 2026. It's a staggering figure, right? But what happens when that entire bet is suddenly exposed to some very, very old-world problems?
You have to see the two different movies playing out at once here. On one screen, you've got S&P Global warning that an energy shock could totally derail those spending plans, and banks are getting nervous, charging more for loans. But on the other screen, CoreWeave is landing an $8.5 billion loan, and NVIDIA is dropping $2 billion on Marvell.
So make no mistake, the build-out is still on. But the capital stack, that whole complex mix of money that funds this stuff, is getting a lot more selective. It's more leveraged, and it's suddenly very exposed to things like geopolitics and basic macroeconomic discipline.
The free money party is definitely winding down. Which brings us to the big synthesis, where all these different pressures finally converge into one single framework. You can forget move fast and break things. The new model is get your permit and be ready for your margin call.
Because this permissioned internet is being built right now at 3 new checkpoints. First, who gets to sell their tech to the government? Second, who gets to keep their legal immunity from lawsuits? And third, who even gets to log on to the platform in the first place? These are the new gates.
And this right here is the bottom line. That old techno-libertarian fantasy of just scaling to the moon with no friction, it's obsolete. The new reality looks a lot more like a heavily regulated industry, where your survival depends on getting the right permits and proving you have the collateral. A margin call, right? That's when your broker calls and demands more cash because your bet looks way too risky. In this new internet, it means the real world is calling, and it's demanding you prove you can cover your debts, whether they're financial, legal, or ethical.
So I'll leave you with this question to chew on. The next time you hear somebody going on and on about infinite AI abundance, just ask yourself this. How long does that euphoria really last when the power grid starts to flicker and the bank is on the phone wanting to see your collateral? That's where the digital dream meets the physical world.